For those who I haven't met in person before, so my name is Brendan Sullivan. I'm the Global Head of Cargo here at IATA. I've actually been in this role since July of 2021. And as Andrew has talked about, it's certainly been a very interesting time to be part of the air cargo industry. Despite some of the very challenging headwinds that Andrew described, air cargo continues to play an extremely valuable part of global supply chains throughout the world. That could be from moving specialized cargo products all the way through to humanitarian movements. Cargo volumes are still expected to ease after this very strong period and ending this year very close to 2021 levels. And some of the positives are that the revenue still remains quite high, 50% above pre-pandemic levels. Overall, when we look at the industry, it's forecast to recover from the worst crisis in its history, turning a small profit in 2023, which is a great achievement considering the scale of the financial and economic damage caused by the pandemic restrictions. We shouldn't forget that air cargo demand actually returned to pre-COVID levels in January 2021. And that was a phenomenal achievement and sets the industry up very well to deal with the headwinds that it faces today. So it's with some of that same agility and that level of resilience that the air cargo industry is well placed to deal with the challenges that we have ahead. And it's really for that reason that we need to focus on these key priorities together. One is achieving our net zero commitment by 2050. Two is continuing to modernize processes. Three, which is actually our #1 priority, and focusing on safety, but really finding better solutions to safely carry lithium batteries. And 4, making air cargo attractive to new talent, new and diverse talent. Focusing on these issues will help the industry through the challenging times and to deliver on the value of air cargo. The air cargo industry is actively working to achieve the industry's net zero by 2050 commitment. Air cargo is a key driver toward the achievement of the UN agenda on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and it actually directly contributes to achieving the targets of 7 of those goals. For that reason, and we heard a little bit from Willie Walsh and others earlier this morning on achieving net zero, so I'm not going to spend any extra time, but we have some additional elements around that for air cargo. The industry's identified some challenges, in particular with the reduction of single-use plastics that we use in our day-to-day operations, and it's making strides towards less harmful materials and reusable alternatives. For example, Lufthansa Cargo newly announced a program to reduce their need for plastics, to invest in more environmentally friendly films. And there are pilots on less harmful plastics by IAG Cargo as well as reusable covers in Latin America by LATAM, who have also pledged to eliminate all of their single-use plastic, including cargo, in the coming years. When we talk about reducing waste, we need to also follow circular approaches. The industry needs to focus on repairing, refurbishing, repurposing, and recycling as much as possible. Air cargo stakeholders are already making progress in this, developing solutions that enable circular strategies, for example, in ULDs, in nets, straps, or other accessories. Another area would be reducing the loss of perishable cargo. And that'll be of special importance if our industry wants to contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to reduce global hunger and ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. If we want to move towards more sustainable operations, we also need to look at transforming our cargo facilities. The industry is working to reduce the negative impacts of our infrastructure on the environment and the surrounding communities. So be that net zero buildings and incorporating sustainability into the planning of those facilities. Electrification and other developments, making these facilities fit for purpose and for those who work inside them. Over the last few years, we've seen an acceleration in air cargo's sustainable transformation. Maintaining momentum is really essential if we want to survive as an industry. We need to bring all industry partners, big and small, on board towards that common goal. Now, moving into something a little bit more specific is PLATI, and this is a reaction to security threats and incidents. The World Customs Organization and ICAO jointly introduced an additional layer in the management of air cargo security risk. We refer to this as preloading advanced cargo information, or PLATI. The goal of these programs is for customs and aviation's authorities to use data which is filed with them for the purpose of an additional screening layer. Airlines and forwarders need to ensure that they actually comply with these new security directives. We actually have a number of them already launched throughout the world. So we have US ACAS, which is in force since 2019. The European Union started its journey with advanced cargo information, and in March of 2023 starts the deployment period for the next phase of EU ICS2. There's draft legislation in Canada, the UAE, and the UK as we foresee implementation. And just focusing a little bit on the EU, the European Union's ICS2, it's really important that the air cargo and the mail industry is ready for the March 2023 deployment period. That deployment period goes all the way through until October of 2023. It would impact about 55% of the IATA membership and 3 to 4 million shipments in the coming year. So it's really substantial impact, and we need to make sure that the industry is ready to file with the governments and that they have the solutions in place. Andrew touched a little bit on e-commerce, and I'm going to go just maybe a little bit more into the detail. It's really an unstoppable trend. The pandemic consolidated consumer behaviors as we were living our lives completely online for a period, and then we continued even as some of those restrictions relaxed. E-commerce became very attractive even to traditional brick and mortar stores, offering omni-channel solutions of which air cargo plays a vital role. We expect to see the value of e-commerce globally hit $5.7 trillion US in 2022, grow to $7.3 trillion US by 2025. Online retail sales on average reached 21% in 2022 across the globe. And even with the drop in consumer spending, we still see that forecast continuing to grow. That actually translates to about 159 billion parcels in 2022, 4 times more than what we had 8 years ago. We see that doubling by 2027. About 80% of cross-border e-commerce is shipped by air, and that really shows that air cargo is actually built to support cross-border e-commerce. We see that right now around 18 to 20% of air cargo by volume is actually e-commerce. And we're really just focusing on B2C e-commerce. When we move and progress more in B2B e-commerce, we see those numbers increasing. Sustainability is still the aviation's license to grow, industry's license to grow, and as a result, we see those efforts gaining momentum from regulators as well as from consumers and companies around the globe. Not just sustainability, not just for e-commerce, there's also the need for compliance. It's still an issue with the transportation of lithium batteries, particularly with the proliferation of new and inexperienced entrants that we see in e-commerce. And we need to continue to press and to help regulators actually crack down on the rogue shippers we see. It's clear that we have challenges ahead. That's absolutely clear. But these are challenges that we're better equipped to face than we were pre-pandemic. We can look at our own organizations, we can note our strengths and improve on the weaknesses. We can better collaborate amongst all the stakeholders, reimagining the global supply chains to drive sustainable and inclusive growth. All of these complex challenges that we face and the need to deliver on this, our promises to provide the consumer with excellent customer service that is expected. Now, my colleagues are actually going to dive a little bit deeper into the subjects around digitalization, around safety and special cargo, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Brendan. Any questions for Brendan? No, I think he explained. Yeah, Michael at the back.
Michael Mackey, Asia Cargo News. Brendan, with the ongoing rise of e-commerce, do you identify any particular problems for the air cargo industry because of its rise? Surely the rise in volumes is a good thing.
The rise in volumes is a good thing, the continuing trend. The challenges around e-commerce, there is no real standardization in how e-commerce is handled. So at World Cargo Symposium this year, we actually had a survey, and 70% of participants indicated that they wanted to see some form of standardization in the way e-commerce can be handled. So that would allow us to handle things more consistently and deliver for the customer. The other is really this number of parcels. So we talk about 159 billion parcels this year, to double in the next 4 years to come. That can be quite challenging to handle. Volume is a good thing, but individual parcels might be more difficult. There, the role of specialized freight forwarders and dedicated capacity starts to be very important. And maybe to go back to one of the earlier questions around the kind of narrow body freighters, and certainly a lot of that, anecdotally at least, seems to be targeted towards the handling of e-commerce movements. Of course, we have parcels. They're a little bit smaller, a little bit less voluminous, especially as companies start to deploy better algorithms for packaging and using less packaging waste in the processes. So I would say that the e-commerce growth is a very good thing for the air cargo industry, and really working with those supply chain partners to make sure that we can capitalize on that is very important.
Thank you. Harry. Sally, sorry.
Hi, Sally Gethin. What role will drones play in the future for air cargo? So obviously drones are going to play a part in an urban landscape as well. You just mentioned small parcels. Well, they're ideal vehicles for that. But perhaps drones also in a wider capacity, perhaps in air cargo facilities as well.
Absolutely. We see that there could be any number of use cases. A few which we've already looked at could be in facility. There's certainly lots of that happening for making the facility itself more efficient. We see that on airport as well, or on airport and immediately off. An example there would be Edmonton International Airport. They actually use a small parcel drone to move goods which need extremely rapid movement. So these are life-saving items to the nearby hospital, which would have taken significantly longer given the layout of that airport. We also see slightly longer deliveries as well, with heavier movement in rural or otherwise locked-in locations. So you might see a larger capacity drone in those instances, or unmanned aircraft. And probably one of the other ones is to deploy more flexible capacity, replacing what we have today, perhaps. So there are smaller feeder-type aircraft movements that we could use than unmanned aircraft for more flexibly to inject that into larger supply chains. So that's lots of examples that we've seen already being explored or even scaled up, as we see with some. And I'm absolutely certain that the industry will come up with many more use cases that we haven't even explored yet. We need to also focus on the immediate priority of getting safe ways of integrating this into the infrastructure that we have, the flying and physical on-ground infrastructure, both.
Thanks, Brendan. Okay. Thanks, Brendan.